Okay, so Jill, with all the mental and emotional health crisis that are going on right now, it seems that directly correlated are addictions. And I want to know, how would you define addiction, and how would you define trauma, and what is the correlation between the two?
Yeah, so I think there's a misconception about what addiction is. Like, for those of you in Vancouver, it's like, oh, East Hastings, there's so many addicted people there. But as a society in general, there is so much addiction that we don't even recognize as addiction. So my definition of it is any behavior that causes soothing in the short term and makes you feel good in the moment, but is harmful long term. So that could be drugs, that could be alcohol, that could be any sort of substance, that could also be overworking. Because when we're overworking, we're not present with our body. We don't have the time to process emotions, which I'll get to in a moment when we talk about what the correlation is and what trauma is. It could also be sugar, it could be food, it could be sex, it could be over exercising, like all of these things that, again, make us feel better in the moment, but are harmful in the long term. So none of these things are actually bad. It's the relationship to it. If it's like, oh, this thing happened, I don't want to feel this feeling, I'm going to go have a glass of wine, or I'm going to go for a run because I literally can't handle the emotion, that's an addiction. Trauma, again, I feel like there's some negative connotations around trauma. Like, we all have trauma. It's just stuck energy in the body from an emotional experience that in the moment we weren't able to process, usually because society says, oh, girls can't rage, or men or boys can't cry. Therefore, usually between the ages of 0 and 7, when most of the programming happens, but it can happen after, the stuck emotion is in the body, and it's in the body until it is viscerally released, which I will talk about in a moment. But you watch animals in the wild, or even pets or a bird, something happens, they get spooked, they shake it off, and then they go on. They process the stuck energy. Whereas us as humans, something will happen. Even I see this with clients with grief sometimes. Somebody will die, they won't grieve the loss. Therefore, the energy is still stuck in their body. And the correlation between the two is the addiction covers up the pain of the trauma. And how we release that is viscerally through the body, whether it's in breath work, meditation, yoga releases a lot. There's so many modalities, but the key is to release the stuck emotion. So it's like not why the addiction, it's why the pain, and how can I feel the pain in a safe environment, release it, and then you're free of it.
Fantastic. Wow. Yeah, that's really well said. Really, really, really well said. I didn't know how you were going to do it, but that was awesome. So Jill, then, and you and I have spoken about this in private, but why is it important for us to overcome our traumas?
Yeah, so many reasons. It's so important to release the trauma, because the trauma is subconsciously and unconsciously creating our behavior and running our life. So any place you're stuck in your life, or you have a repeated pattern or an addiction, there's a trauma there, which is fine, because I mean, it's fine when you recognize it, because we can then release it. Again, as Al said, the first step is awareness. So if we're unaware of it, we can't do anything about it. But once we become aware of it, it's like, whoa, every time like I'll give you a funny example, but it's a real example for me. I almost failed computers in high school. I was like really good in all my other subjects, and I almost failed. And my parents got really angry. They're like, what is this? So I had a trauma, a samskara in my body, like running my life. And people would be like, oh, can you just do this like computer thing? And it'd be a simple task, but I literally couldn't sit down and like try and do it without having an anxiety attack. So I just avoided it. The one day I decided I was going to do it, I sat at my computer and I cried for an hour, and I just released it. And the next day I went back and I was like, oh, I'm actually like pretty decent at this, but it was controlling my life for like 2.5 years. I tried to build a website and I literally just couldn't do it because I wasn't willing to feel that. Another example is in relationships. So say you have abandonment issues, and as I did, this is another example from my life, and you haven't felt that, but you want a partnership. You will continue to draw partners who will abandon you or who will bring up that feeling until it's healed and released, which is a huge opportunity, because once it is, it's like that anxiety, that fear of, oh, what if I get abandoned? What are they doing? Goes away. And it's like, oh, okay, now I'm okay by myself and they're an asset to my life. And if it doesn't work, then we can have this conversation, a conscious conversation of this isn't working. But until the trauma is released, the emotion, which isn't always comfortable, and a lot of times it's a lot of crying or rage, but then you're free of it. And I should say most people want to get to their CD, which is their highest life, when they're in the most joy and the most peace and the most abundance. The problem is, a lot of people just want to get there, but we have to go in through the shadow. And that is where our traumas are up, release them, transmute them. And then we access our gifts. We all have God-given gifts. And then from there is the CD. There is no bypassing. Like, there's no way to get to and unlock our gifts and unlock our highest self without going through the shadow, releasing them, transmuting them. So when you recognize, oh, I have trauma here, I have this feeling I don't want to feel, it's amazing, because once you go into it and transmute it, your life literally changes in the best ways possible.
Yeah, thank you so much. I know you and I have had some